Whenever we consider a subject of importance, like karma and its agents, which include things like the permanent atoms, the planets, the signs of the zodiac, the bodies, the rays, and so on, karma and its agents, we should always bear in mind the total nature of man. We should remember that man has a cosmic bank. The cosmic bank is the vortex of energy which is produced through the interplay of his three spiritual essences. The interplay of divine persistent will, or Atma, with compassion, or Buddhi, and abstract thought, or Manas. These three structures themselves are built around their permanent atoms. They form, of course, the higher triad. We should see them always as being a reservoir of energy which forms the necessary structure within man's psyche. Now, this reservoir of energy constitutes what we might loosely term a cosmic bank. There is no experience that we have had in our many lives on the earth which does not deposit something into the cosmic bank of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. That bank is a receiver, and it is a donator. We constantly deposit into it, and this alone gives us the basis for a wonderful philosophy of life, that nothing is lost, that all our struggles, all our efforts are meaningful. It is quite compensation for the person, the embattled disciple, to know that his struggles and efforts are all rewarded somewhere. And of course, the triad of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas is easily examined by the Master, by the higher self, by the Namanikayas, the Buddhas, who are concerned with the spiritual unfoldment of mankind. For in that reservoir there are the coded information which they would require to examine. Now, the cosmic bank is something which attends our daily lives. It is from this reservoir that the divine energies let loose in us in meditation are derived. It is from this reservoir that the flashes of energy which we register as vritties emerge. It is from this reservoir that the so-called muses emerge. The muses that visit us during our inspirational moments. They are said to be under the control of Musagetes, and he himself is the psychopomp. The psychopomp releases the muses. They visit us. They are ambassadors of this reservoir of ours of divine energy. They bless us with the inspiration that gives off such things as poetic insight, the in-stress of inscape, the highly coloured vritties of our moments of pensiveness, the meditational images that bless us in those quiet moments of meditation. But there are very practical applications of this knowledge, this understanding, that there are reservoirs of energy accessible to us on the different planes. There are also reservoirs which do not last forever, which can be called upon in this life but become quickly dissipated. And these are the reservoirs that exist on the mental plane and the astral plane and the etheric world. When we consider the subject as an example of the uses or the expressions of higher energies, when we come to consider the subject of schizophrenia, we have a very interesting pattern of energies at play. Schizophrenia is a product of activities going on in all the planes that man has his psyche located. We find that schizophrenia is related to a change of ray at the soul level. We're talking about the deepest causes of the condition, the causes that lie at spiritual levels, the three planes of Atma, Buddhi and Manas, in which we contain our reservoir, our cosmic bank. And the spiritual cause of schizophrenia is that of a change of ray, and the ray that is emerging is the seventh ray soul. The seventh ray soul is the ray which is beginning to replace the former ray of the soul of that individual. Now, of course, that is at a very deep level. What we also appreciate is that there are mental causes of schizophrenia going back into previous lives, and the mental causes are, of course, related to the incapacity of the individual or the inability of the individual in previous lives to be introspective, to be able to exert his subjective nature, to be able to ponder, to brood, to meditate, to examine the inner worlds, as it were. And so this lack builds up an imbalance in the mental permanent atoms, an imbalance which cries out for correction. And so we would say then lack of introspection, or the capacity for it, or the use of it, is the mental karmic causative. We have already considered the spiritual karmic causative. Now we are considering the mental. Then we must also consider, of course, the astral or emotional cause of schizophrenia. And this is lack of control of the emotional nature, an explosive emotional nature lacking in control. And again, this is embodied in the astral permanent atom. That information is coded on the astral permanent atom, just as the mental cause is coded on the mental permanent atom. These three factors then press for expression, and the overshadowing soul or monad may decide that the time is right for this difficulty to be alleviated, and it would then choose possibly a life in which the ovum, which is attached by the overshadowing soul, is one with a recessive gene in it. And so we have the physical cause, a recessive gene, and this recessive gene permits such things as the inability to deal with stress, the inability to deal with stress. And when stress is present, the recessive gene asserts itself, and we have the physical manifestation of schizophrenia. And so all these together, we would consider under the heading of karmic factors or karmic causes of schizophrenia. Now, the obvious mechanism of this process lies in the permanent atoms. The mechanism, the agents by which these, may I say, inborn errors of previous life activity are now expressed. So, in order to observe how atavism works, we have chosen an example of schizophrenia. And we would say that given the presence of vibrations which mirror in some way the physical symptoms of schizophrenia, the emotional symptoms of it, and the mental symptoms of it, and even the spiritual symptoms of it, given these vibrations in the person's life, there will be an atavism thrown forward from previous lives demanding attention. Now that may seem to be abstruse, and therefore we need immediately to grasp the idea of what constitutes a permanent atom. The matter is not clear-cut. There is almost no literature at all, even in the esoteric field, on the subject of atavism. You can rake your way through the secret doctrine. You can look carefully into books like Cosmic Fire, and even the Study in Consciousness of Annie Besant, leading occult works, and you will find practically no reference whatever to atavism. And so we have had to do research work here on our own. And my own work, of course, is major in this respect, and that is what I propose to deal with here today. Let us consider what is required of a permanent atom. Let's consider what is required of a permanent atom. It is something which remains after death. It is something which remains after death. So that is a prerequisite of it. It means that after death, something is retained in the physical plane. Even though it may be connected, it would be connected to the soul. Something remains after the final dissipation of the astral body and the astral world after death. It also implies that something of the mental permanent atom, even if only a reflection of it, must also remain after the mental body is dissipated and we undergo the second death and then enter the heaven state between lives. These structures remain, and of course, when the soul descends once more, having absorbed the spiritual essences of the last life, when the soul descends once more, it merely has to activate the permanent atom. It's as if the permanent atom were like a magnet, or an electromagnet would be a better description of it. The soul's energies flow down into it, begin to activate it, and the permanent atom begins to attract atoms of mental substance of a similar vibratory rate to the note which is being sounded through the activated permanent atom by the descending soul. The note varies from time to time. The initial note of the permanent atom is variable, and through this variation, layers of mental material become successively attracted, so that we get the emergence of the so-called mental sheath. Thereafter, we have, of course, the same phenomenon occurring with the astral permanent atom, but the difference being that there is already an agglomerating sheath of mental substance. The astral permanent atom is activated, and in the same way we have the accumulation of astral atoms. The word that we could use here is accretion, where layer after layer is packed onto the evolving sheath. And then finally, of course, we have at the etheric level, we have the equivalent in the physical permanent atom, with accretions first of etheric substances or etheric materials which go to make an etheric matrix, and then the flowing in the embryo rapidly of physical materials. And this etheric matrix constantly interacts with the chromosomes and genes of the physical part of the etheric physico-nature, and you get this massive interplay with the emergence or the materialization of a physical body. Now, we're going to today consider these prerequisites. These prerequisites that we have dealt with here must be present in the physical permanent atom. And so we're going to try and locate the site of this physical permanent atom. There have been suggestions in the past that it nestles in a cavity, in etheric substance in the region of the heart. And it's a very nice, splendid idea, unfortunately erroneous. So let us consider the matter further. There is much that we can draw on, however. We can consider the nature of the ultimate atoms of physical matter. And we know they form heart-like structures, heart-shaped structures. We have pictures of ultimate atoms, and we know them to be vortices of energy. We know them to take in energies through their vortex and to emit energies from their torrents. We know that these energies in the meantime spiral around the spirali, and so we have the manifestation of a simple ultimate atom. But when we come to look at man, we have to recognize that we are dealing with a fiery life, something that is not in the physical permanent atom, closely related to so much as the tangible atoms, but rather to the fiery elemental lives that ensoul them. And so we must study the simplest form of the human organism. And the simplest form of the human organism is, of course, the fertilized egg. The egg which has received the sperm, and the sperm's head contains the chromosomal pattern for the father, and the two eggs unite together and form a union, and it is then that the two sets of chromosomes from both parents unite, and immediately there begins the process of mitosis. Mitosis being ordinary cell division. And so we say one cell becomes two, and each of the two cells divide into two, giving us 4, and the 4 become 8, and the 8 become 16, and so the process goes on. And if we conceive of the permanent atom as being just a single entity, it is buried somewhere here and could be lost by the death of a cell, could be extruded through the death of the cell in which it finds itself. No, that won't do. And so, through the assistance of the Namanicaya, who was Plato, we have been able to unravel something of the nature of the physical permanent atom. We find that in fact it is related to one of the chromosomes, one of the human chromosomes. Of course, this applies equally so, but with modifications to chromosomes in animals. We find that just before an ordinary cell, human or otherwise, begins to divide, its genetic material, the material which contains the coded information as to what plan should be adopted in building the cell, begins to line up in the tropics of the cell, in what we have termed mitosis. Now there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in man, and the number varies from organism to organism. These 23 pairs of chromosomes have their numbers, and we are beginning to allocate or discover what human characteristics are linked to what chromosomes. And so the human qualities, his eyes, the color of his eyes, the texture of the hair, the thickness of the skin, all his characteristics have coded information on one or other of these 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now that's pure biology. However, what we are concerned with now is the permanent physical atom. And we find that this is related to the 23rd chromosome, to the 23rd of chromosomes. Now, chromosomes, as you possibly know, are made up of genes, and the genes are bead-like structures in the cord of the chromosome, and these bead-like structures contain the various coded information. The chromosome is not active all the time, or not totally active the whole time. When some coded information becomes relevant, there is a thickening of the chromosomal spiral, and then the genes in that area begin to be active, and from them messages are sent to the elements of the cell telling them what to do. Again, this is pure biology. We would therefore say that the 23rd chromosome has a region of it which is related intimately to the physical permanent atom. Now, the 23rd chromosome is the sex-bearing chromosome. It is the sex-bearing chromosome. It is slightly smaller than the other chromosomes. And of course, thinking back and reviewing this matter, of course it would have to be the sex-bearing chromosome, because part of the karmic information, part of the karmic coding decides the nature of the sex, decides the nature of the sex, whether it's going to be masculine or feminine, and also similarly the female qualities of that individual, the male qualities of that individual, and their mixing, all humans having both male and female qualities interblended. And so the physical permanent atom lies in the 23rd chromosome. Now, the 23rd chromosome is variable. There is an X factor and there is a Y factor in the male. But in the female, there are two similar chromosomes. The pair are similar. And we say it's the YY chromosome of the 23rd, which is the female. So that is the difference between male and female. The male has a 23rd pair of chromosomes, which are X and Y. We mean that the X part of the pair is different from the Y part. And in the female has two similar Y parts. So that is female and that is male. We therefore know by observation that the permanent atom is part of the Y chromosome. It's part of the Y. And so it exists both in male and in female. Now this is true of the very first cell. It's true of the very first cell, the cell that was actually produced at conception. Conception implies the bringing together of the male and the female part of the ovum. And at conception we have then a single cell which proceeds to line up its chromosomes, one set from the father, one set from the mother, and the cell begins to go into division, producing two cells. Obviously, then we must say that somewhere in the original cell, in the 23rd chromosome, the Y part of the 23rd chromosome, there is anchored the physical permanent atom. All right then, at the first cell division, we find that the physical permanent atom itself, heart-like, produces a division. It produces a division. And there then appears in the two new cells the physical permanent atom and its exact replica in the second cell, still attached to the 23rd chromosome. And again, in the cells dividing once more, the 23rd chromosome, its Y component, contains the physical permanent atom. And so right through to the morula. And what is beginning to emerge then is a structure which is becoming increasingly complex, because just as ultimate atoms themselves are linked to each other by a stream of energy, let's complete the little drawing here by putting in another ultimate atom. We would say that these two are linked to each other by a stream of energy, or there may be three of them. And when we study occult chemistry, we have examples of these, where three ultimate atoms are linked together to form a molecule on a lower subplane. Just as you have this, so you have the linking together of these structures in complex ways, so that when you begin to reach the stage of the morula, when the first human cell is divided so frequently as to form a morula, not unlike the ohm symbol that we have here, in which the ohm is ever present, the emergence then is of a line of energy which is ever extending. It is ever extending, and of course these cells go through the stages of embryology, of embryo formation, fetus formation, child formation with birth, and eventually we have the immense structure of the completed man, and all cells contain the replica of the ultimate, or replica of the replica of the permanent physical atom. And so we see these fine lines everywhere linking up the permanent atoms, forming what we would then call man's permanent atom, something in the shape of his physical body. But you must see it as a fine spray-like structure of shimmering energy, and each cell has got a nodule containing, in the trillions of them, in the trillions of cells of the body, there is this fine spray-like particle which is luminous, which is the physical permanent atom in man. And so really what has been created eventually in the adult organism is a very fine three-dimensional screen. a very fine three-dimensional screen has been created, and it is onto this screen that the impacts of karma, the impacts of the karmic factors that we described earlier are replicated itself, and the physical permanent atom therefore has a representative in every cell of the human body. The total together forming a beautiful complex, a network, a very fine network, which is able to receive impacts of karmic energies via these permanent atoms into each one of the cells, not only producing cellular effects, but effects in organs, effects in limbs, effects in the total man himself. Now, that sort of mechanism is not only visible clairvoyantly, but of course exists at the physical level, and it is a very real structure. When death occurs, the long lines that connect each of these representatives, replicas of the physical permanent atom, they shrink, and eventually the life is withdrawn completely, and all that remains is the original permanent atom. But as death supervenes, the information of the whole lifetime of physical activity during the whole of the life is still retained. Each cell involved in physical activity, involved in that period of great stress, when you underwent perhaps financial ruin, when you were forced to undertake work of a degrading nature, all that information is recorded in the ultimate physical atoms of every cell, and when death occurs, of course that information finally concretes, reflects itself into the remaining physical, mothering, permanent atom that is retained for all the lives on the earth. And so we have taken the original concept of the permanent atom, and we have taken it into the field of practical application. We no longer have to go all quiet about ideas that a permanent atom can remain between lives. All that it needs to do is to remain in its etheric state. In its etheric state, it remains attached by the sutratma to the soul. And this is true also, but with different degrees of intensity, in the astral body and in the mental body of man. And so we now have then a sort of basis on which we can construct a reliable understanding of the matter of atavism. Now the atavism becomes easily understood, that in this life we have a beautiful three-dimensional screen which can absorb impressions from the atavistic throw-forwards of experiences of previous lives. And so one may undergo a series of creative expressions over many lives. We may become a poet or a dramatist, and those capacities are never lost. They continue to be held within the permanent atoms on the emotional plane, the mental and the physical. And what is more, we leave behind us on the earth the impacts of those expressions. There are those that go on reading the poetry. There are those that go on experiencing joys or thrills from the paintings that have been created, or the music that has been written. And these energies, originally created by the artist, remain in the precincts of these inner planes. When the permanent atoms are taken up again by the author or by the composer, and they begin to send out their notes, then they draw once more from the various planes the kind of atoms which have been impressed by the thrills of mental energy when the poetry was read, when the pictures were appraised. A very difficult subject indeed, but now at least we have got some tangible, if we may use such a word, tangible basis for understanding the mechanism whereby these matters can go on. But we would be very foolish to limit this idea to just the human organism. We must understand that there are permanent atoms within the great cosmic entity who ensouled the civilization of Atlantis, who ensouled the civilization of Lemuria. There are the great permanent atoms of the cosmic entity who ensouls humanity. And we can see atavism being reflected forward even at these levels. And so there has long been a tradition that modern Europe and North America, are an atavistic throw forward from the height of the Atlantean civilization, that we are seeing now an atavistic expression in the forward elements of the European American civilizations. What is occurring, in fact, is, of course, that similar vibrations are being created in Europe and the USA, and these vibrations have an empathy with the vibrations of the highest achievements of Atlantis. And there is atavism occurring. The process is being emphasized by atavistic arrivals of energy from the Akashic representative of Atlantis. And so we would say, yes, this is atavism on a grand scale, the atavism of the highest achievements of Atlantis being thrown forward into the situation today. But with it also comes the harsh materialism of Atlantis. And this harsh materialism can be seen today in many of the cities of Europe and North America. But within this great arc of atavism, extending from mid-Atlantis to the present-day Europe and America, there are minor arcs. And we see today expressions of Greece and Rome. We see expressions of the glory that was Greece and the grandeur that was Rome showing up again in these civilizations, or some of them. We find the expression of Rome in Britain and in North America. Even the materialists of Las Vegas, the materialists of cities like Dallas and New York, even they who are historians by academic training, are noticing the extraordinary similarity between Rome and especially North America. The similarity of expression the harsh use of material methods to achieve definite objects. We hope that with it all there will emerge new patterns which reflect ancient Rome's achievements, the achievement of Roman law, the achievement of Roman freeways, if I may call them that. See how Rome's ability to build roads, to create communications, has not been reflected suddenly, rapidly, first in the autobahns of Germany, and then later in the freeways of North America. Breathtaking spectacles, mirroring in our age through atavism the Roman creativeness, their specialization for roadways, communications, also things like hygiene, public baths, law and order, their harsh, one-pointed, militaristic ways, methods, their concept of a world domination, the world of their day and the world of our day, first as it was seen through the eyes of British imperialists, and now, of course, through the eyes of American imperialism. Atavism taken to a vaster scale. But we should not allow the process to get out of hand. We must, whilst being interested in vast cosmic representations of atavism, we must see it also as showing itself in us. And the only real and lasting experience in man is what he experiences between the eyebrows, what he experiences in the sacred squarage between his eyebrows. Those are the only real and lasting features of his creativeness. For what we experience there may live forever. Only when structures come out of the unconscious and are reborn here in the brow of man are they given eternal life. They lie in the unconscious, undeveloped for eons, but only when man can bring them into the space between his brows and clothe them with the external of his own world do we give them real and eternal life. From these things create we can forms more real than living man, nurslings of immortality. From Percy Bysshe Shelley's poem, Song in the Mind, the Spirit of Prometheus Unbound. And in the end, it is our own experiences that count. Those experiences change us. They change us into creative individuals, just not materialists who replicate, who use and abuse at the physical level, but those of us who are truly creative, who can first of all create the living image here and then send it off into the world to take on a physical form, whether it is in a play or a poem or a picture or an ideal. It may go on living forever. Now, the kind of information that we have gelled here this afternoon, the kind of information that we have gelled here, should come to all of you. Certainly it is presented to you. It is presented to you, but you reject it. You reject it by falling asleep. You reject it by switching on the television during the period of your leisure. You constantly reject what is being proffered to you by your higher self, which is only a fragment of the one ultimate self, the world soul, if you like to call it that. Let us say, let us put in higher monastic symbology the kind of thing that we have talked about here. Let us imagine within the space of the brows a horizon, and let us imagine that there are things on the horizon of human consciousness. Isn't the horizon always a beautiful symbol for consciousness? New horizons we talk about, new horizons, and we imply extensions of consciousness, seeing things that we didn't see before, embracing concepts that were impossible to us before. But new horizons mean things that extend our awareness. And when we look to the horizon seems the same in our everyday life. It always seems to be the same. And even if there were new structures there, we can't really grasp them. But let us say that the horizon is there, and it's on a dark night of your life, when you are immersed in materialism, and we can't see these spiritual entities on the horizon of our consciousness. But let us say that in the midst of that dark night, we meditate, we use a scientific process for extending awareness, and let us then say that there comes up from beneath the horizon of our consciousness a great orb, a great golden yellow moon. A great moon begins to come up above the horizon. When it comes up above the horizon, structures that we sense on the horizon but could not see, we now are able to see. We are now able to see because a backdrop of light has been provided for them. And so we could say this was true of the great ovum, the fertilized ovum, which contains the secret of the permanent physical atom. And the first glimmerings of this information, never given out on the planet before, the first glimmerings, and notice the choice of word here, the first glimmerings of this reality came to me as this great symbol. I have Libra rising. There is a Libra symbol. It's part of our esoteric astrology. A planet, a sun, a moon, coming up or descending, coming up above the horizon or descending below the horizon. And when such a source of light lightens up the horizon, or when an ovum is looked at with a new light, we see structures within it. We see the 23rd chromosome as representing a mystery, containing a mystery, perhaps symbolized by somebody reaching up towards the heavens and against a backdrop of a light source. Now that's how it came to me at the beginning. The moment that the seed is placed there in the sacred square inch between the brow, then you have something that you can nourish. Then you have something that you can feed, something that will begin to sprout and eventually will begin to grow flowers. And those flowers contain the seeds of knowledge which I have given to you here today. How can you tell that to the outside world? that those who inspire us work in that way, and they will not work in any other way, not to suit a current civilization, especially when that civilization is an atavistic reflection, not always good atavism. There is good and poor. An atavistic reflection of Atlantis, especially in its most material sense. We must never see atavism as being just something which is there, a mechanism of nature. It is a mechanism which is seized upon by the soul. The soul deliberately uses atavism. Frequently the soul will choose a life merely to examine through atavism the potential and the standing of the personality that it has set in motion. It will test out your equipment, if that's what it is wanting to do in that life. It will test out your equipment through atavism. It will be able to reflect into you through your permanent atoms the atavistic tendencies of previous lives and see whether they produce results in your personality. And if through the release of this atavism there are defects in personality, then they are highlighted to the soul. The soul can observe what they are, can then take account of them and make adjustments in that life and in the future lives. It reminds me so much of my own experiences with magnetism and the use of magnetic fields. I had a smile to myself when I heard that Space Shuttle is measuring the magnetic fields around the shuttle. Of course, magnetism affects man. Affects him physically, affects him etherically, affects him emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. Magnetism, the beloved energy of the gods. And so the soul may demand, like magnetism demands, that a thing cannot be allowed to let lie. If there is a difficulty deep within you, if there is a pocket of pus somewhere within you, magnetism will not let it lie. It will nudge it out. It will make it point so that it comes out as a boil or comes out as an ulceration and is thus, as it were, removed. Similarly, the soul uses the magnetism of atavism to bring out deep ingrained defects. Now, we have seen that in discipleship this is especially true. At the moment that the man begins to tread the path of unfoldment, everything that is good in him and everything that is difficult in him is thrown to the surface, where it can be dealt with, or if not dealt with in that life, then planned to be dealt with in lives to come. We talk about even the sign of Scorpio, where trials and tests of initiation are undertaken, quoting the example of Hercules, the great initiate, the human initiate. But we must not always think of ourselves in terms of undergoing tests and trials for initiation. That would be far too flamboyant and spiritually arrogant. We must also understand that the sign of Scorpio in your chart provides you with opportunities for atavistic tendencies to come out of the dark. There's Scorpio for you. To come out of the dark and to express themselves in your personality in that life, where they can be dealt with and cleared away forever, or where they may be entrenched and elevated if they are karmic factors of a very beautiful spiritual nature. don't always see atavism as being the expression of difficult matters, going back way into your past, but also of beautiful and spiritual matters. And so in this way, the soul makes the flaws show, and atavism encourages the demonstration of the strengths and the flaws in your permanent atoms. There are so many ways in which this lovely subject, vast subject, can express itself in symbology. It's as if the master mason of the brick wall, the man who supervises the higher self, comes along and you're the apprentice mason. It's you that is slogged against building the wall up, carrying the mortar, the bricks, placing them in position, and you've done a fair job, but the master mason has to come along, the soul, and test the wall out. And if there are pieces of the wall that are unsound, then he will soon prod them and find out where the wall is defective, maybe lean against it, push against it, and so the wall collapses all over the apprentice, and the apprentice is reminded in this harsh way that he has built a defective wall. Yes, another image, things that can talk to you. And of course, if you have the ability to interpret your horoscope in such a way as to lay down, through the use of the sign Scorpio, lay down questions, lay down points of reference, terms of reference, then you can engage in a discussion with the higher self on the subject of atavism. Many of us are atavistic in our human relationships. Always remember that the right conduct of human relationships is the greatest single barrier between the disciple and initiation. The ability to conduct right human relationships. So easy to say, I can't get on with so-and-so, I will discard him. I can't get on with this, or I can't get on with that, and go through life just discarding. Saturn in the 11th house, very good example of it. Somebody had a soul's purpose done. And in the soul's purpose they were told that friendships in this life would be very difficult for them. The soul's purpose pointed out that in previous lives the native, the person involved, had betrayed friends. And now in this life he is without friends. He didn't like the idea at all, but he had to admit that it was true. In this life he had made no friends. And that kind of atavism is very frequent indeed. Atavism related to right human relationships. And of course in the field of the esoteric, we have human relationships which can exasperate even the most integrated minds. We are subjected to stresses and strains, spreading our relationships between two worlds, the inner and the outer. And our ability, our capacity to deal with humans who are on the path can be very demanding indeed. And it is then when the soul assists us with atavistic capacities. How often are we not faced with such challenges in our human relationships? When we tread the path, we sit at a table, and somebody comes to join us, and straight away We can feel if there is flattery there. We can feel if there is flirting. We can sense many things from that individual, so that unless they are genuine, we want to reject them. Things that we weren't capable of 10 or 15 years ago before we trod the path. It's all because the atavism is working. We sense such things as insincerity, not because we have had hundreds of experiences in this life, but because of the atavism coming to us from the planes of Atma, Buddhi and Manas, which tell us deep within us that we are confronted with a person who is not true, not real, insincere, shabby, artificial. Because one of the greatest things that atavism can do is to help us to sense, to discriminate the real from the unreal. And this applies particularly in human relationships.